We were never lovers. But somehow, losing her felt like heartbreak. I still remember the night of rain. The city lights bled into the wet pavement, each drop reflecting a memory I couldn't outrun. He stood on the balcony, the glow of distant street lamps flickering behind his silhouette, wondering how she could walk away when his heart had already given up the fight. The pain of almost loving you, it is like grieving a relationship that never existed. The kind of ache that doesn't heal with time, because there was never the closure you needed. We met in the golden haze of possibility. She laughed in a cafe corner, the kind of laugh that made the world soften. He watched from across the table, quietly, because he knew what she didn't yet, that his presence would become both comfort and confession. For a while they walked side by side, not lovers yet, not strangers either. Two souls sharing halfway steps. Nights spent talking without saying exactly what might happen next. Sunlit mornings when the future felt open. Then came the distance. A gentle shift at first, almost invisible. Her glance elsewhere, his words shorter, the coffee cups cooling before he took the first sip. And in that in-between space he felt the walls building, the space between her thoughts and his. One evening, he saw her through the mist of streetlights, wrapped in someone else's arms, laughter you'd mistaken for forgiveness. The sound of her voice carried past him, unnoticed, while the memory of their many, almost moments echoed in his chest. He remembered telling himself, maybe it's not yet, maybe timing is cruel, but when you're falling quietly, there's no pause button. Only the slow surrender when you realize the almost has taken you further than you planned. And now here he stands, with city lights behind him, rain tracing paths down the glass, watching the silhouette of her figure fade into someone else's tomorrow. Did we ever have a chance? He asks the night. The wind answers with a soft sigh, because love left unspoken still leaves scars. Because the thing we almost had can feel as real as the thing we lost. If you've ever stood on that edge, looking back on everything you were close to, everything you never fully claimed, then this story is for you. The pain of almost loving you isn't less than heartbreak. It is its own kind of heartbreak altogether. Tonight we begin that story. Ethan met Leah in the most ordinary way. The kind that doesn't announce its importance until much later. It was the start of their final year at university. The hallways smelled faintly of rain and photocopied paper. Students drifted between classes, each carrying the quiet urgency of people chasing something. A future, a dream, a version of themselves that would finally make sense. Ethan wasn't the loud type. He was the one who noticed things others overlooked. The way sunlight touched old notice boards, the way people laughed differently when they were nervous. He'd been through heartbreak before, the kind that didn't shatter you loudly but hollowed you quietly. Leah was new in his department. She had that soft, distracted energy of someone still piecing herself together. Her hair often fell across her face when she spoke, and her eyes carried stories she didn't yet know how to tell. They met through a mutual friend during a group project. It was supposed to be a quick meeting, notes, assignments, deadlines. But somehow time stretched. What was meant to be 20 minutes turned into 3 hours of unexpected connection. She made the first joke. He remembered because it wasn't even that funny, but he laughed anyway, not because of the joke, but because of her. That night, as they walked out of the library, rain started to fall again. Soft, familiar. She didn't run. She stood there, arms open, face tilted to the sky. He watched from a few steps away, something in him quietly shifting. It wasn't attraction in the usual sense. It was recognition, like two songs finding the same rhythm. Over the next few weeks, they became inseparable. Not in the dramatic movie way, but in the slow, ordinary ways that matter. Morning texts about deadlines, shared playlists, random food runs. a habit of sitting together at the same spot under the old oak tree near the art building. Leah loved art, not just painting, but anything that made life feel less heavy. She'd sketch people in the cafeteria when she thought no one noticed. Ethan did. He always did. Sometimes he'd watch her draw, fascinated by how her silence could be so expressive. Other times, they'd talk about everything and nothing. How she once wanted to be a photographer, how he feared becoming like his father, a man who buried emotions behind responsibilities. Their conversations slipped into nights, the kind where the world goes quiet, and words become a bridge between two hearts trying not to fall. He would ask, "Do you ever think about the people you were meant to love but never did?" And she'd smile faintly, replying, "Maybe we meet them in another lifetime, when timing is kinder." They never called it love. They didn't need to. Every glance, every shared silence said what words couldn't. But there was always that hesitation, that invisible line neither dared to cross. Leah was still nursing the ghost of her last relationship. Someone who promised forever but left without explanation. Ethan knew what that kind of loss did to a person. He didn't want to push her, and she didn't want to break him. They told themselves they were just friends. It was easier that way. But even silence has a truth it can't hide. Every shared song became a confession. Every goodbye felt like a test. How far could they stretch the word almost before it broke? And in those late-night conversations, somewhere between honesty and fear, they built something fragile, something real, something neither could name without risking everything. People say real love begins with a confession, but sometimes it begins with restraint. With two people holding back because they're terrified of ruining the only thing that feels right. And that's how it began. Not with fireworks, not with grand gestures, but with quiet moments, unfinished sentences, and two hearts pretending not to notice how close they were to falling. Looking back now, I realize it wasn't the words we said that changed everything. It was the ones we didn't. Love doesn't always announce itself with grand gestures. Sometimes it grows quietly, in shared silences, in unspoken understanding, in glances that last a second too long. For Ethan and Leah, it was exactly that. They were inseparable. Study sessions turned into movie nights. Movie nights turned into 3 a.m. phone calls about life, fears, and everything in between. She'd fall asleep mid-conversation, her breathing soft on the other end of the line, and Ethan would listen, smiling, as if silence itself had become sacred. But love, when left undefined, begins to ache. He started noticing the little things, the way she'd pull away when their hands brushed, how she'd change the subject whenever he got too close to saying what he felt. She would tell him she wasn't ready, that her heart still felt heavy from what came before, and he'd nod, even though every part of him wanted to say, asterisk, "I'll wait," asterisk. There's a stage in almost love where everything feels perfect, right before the uncertainty starts. They began spending evenings by the lake near campus. Leah sketching, Ethan writing. He'd read her his unfinished poems, and she'd laugh, saying he romanticized sadness too much. "Maybe sadness is the only thing that feels honest," he'd reply. Sometimes, they'd walk without talking, letting the air do the speaking for them. He'd catch her looking at him, not the way friends do, but the way someone does when they're afraid of wanting something real again. It was during one of those evenings that she said it, "I'm scared of loving again." He didn't answer immediately. He just looked at her, the way you look at someone you already love, and said quietly, "Then let me be the place where love doesn't hurt." She smiled, not because she believed him, but because she wished she could. That night, she didn't go home early. They sat there until the streetlights flickered on, saying nothing, because sometimes silence feels safer than promises. Time has a way of changing people, not suddenly but slowly, like erosion. Leah began to drift, not out of cruelty but confusion. Her texts became shorter, her calls less frequent. Ethan tried to convince himself it was stress, final exams, life moving fast. But in his heart, he knew something or someone was pulling her away. One night, after days of silence, he saw a photo on her social feed. Leah laughing at a cafe, the same one they used to go to. Next to her, a man he didn't recognize. He scrolled past it quickly, pretending it didn't hurt, but the ache lingered like an unanswered question. He drafted a message, "I miss you," then deleted it. Typed again, "Are you okay?" Deleted that too. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't saying goodbye. It's saying nothing when your heart wants to scream everything. Days turned into weeks. She stopped coming to the usual places. The bench by the lake stayed empty. He tried to focus on classes, on friends, on anything that didn't remind him of her, but she was everywhere. In the scent of rain, in the songs they once shared, in the notebook where she'd once doodled his name absent-mindedly. People around him noticed the change. How his laughter grew softer, how his eyes seemed tired even when he smiled. One of his friends asked, "You ever gonna tell her how you feel?" And Ethan just shook his head. "It's not my place anymore." Graduation day. The campus buzzed with celebration, laughter, cameras, confetti. But Ethan felt like he was watching someone else's life. He spotted Leah across the courtyard. She was radiant, sunlight catching her hair, her smile effortless. Beside her stood the same man from the photo. For a moment, she looked his way. Their eyes met, just long enough to feel everything they'd left unsaid rush back in one silent heartbeat. Then she looked away. He wanted to walk up to her, to say something, anything. But what do you say to someone who was never yours to lose? Later that night, back in his room, he scrolled through their old messages. The good mornings, the don't forget to eat, the can't sleep you up. It all felt like echoes of another life. He opened a new note on his phone and began to type. Not to send, just to remember. I hope you're happy. I hope he listens to your stories the way I did. I hope you never feel the kind of ache I feel right now. Because even though I never called you mine, losing you feels exactly like heartbreak. He closed his eyes. The rain outside tapped against the window, steady, rhythmic, like a reminder that life moves on, even when hearts don't. It's strange how two people can be everything to each other for a moment, and then nothing at all. He didn't hate her. He couldn't. Because how do you hate someone who never made you a promise, and still broke your heart? We were never lovers. But somehow, losing her felt like heartbreak. It's strange how grief changes shape. At first it's loud, messy, desperate. But with time it becomes quieter, more familiar. Like a song you don't mean to hum, yet it finds you anyway. Weeks passed after graduation. The world kept spinning. Friends moved cities. New beginnings filled the spaces where old dreams used to live. Ethan stayed behind for a while, working part-time at the university library. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was his way of holding on to the last place she existed beside him. Every day he'd pass the lake on his way home, the one they once claimed as theirs. The bench was always empty, but he sat there anyway. Sometimes he brought a book, sometimes just silence. He said nothing to anyone, but inside, the same question kept echoing. Why does something that never started still feel like it ended? Then, one afternoon, as he packed up books from a study table, he found something. A small, torn sketch. A drawing of two hands almost touching. He knew that drawing. It was Leah's. Maybe she'd left it there by accident. Or maybe, somehow, it was meant for him to find. He stared at it for a long time, fingers tracing the pencil lines. In that moment, it hit him. He'd been holding on to the idea of her longer than he ever held her in reality. That night, for the first time, he let himself cry. Not because he wanted her back, but because he finally understood. She was never his to lose. Love doesn't always end with goodbye, he whispered to himself. Sometimes, it ends in silence, in the spaces between what we said and everything we were too afraid to. He realized that what they had, that almost love, wasn't a mistake. It was a lesson, a reminder that love can exist even when it's unspoken, that not every story needs a happy ending to mean something. He began writing again, quietly in notebooks she'd once borrowed. Poems about timing, about fear, about the beauty of almost. Each line was a release, each word a step away from her. People think healing is forgetting, but healing is remembering without breaking. And one day, not immediately but eventually, he woke up and she wasn't the first thing he thought about. He made coffee, watched the sunrise. The world looked the same, but it felt lighter. A few months later, he saw her again, by accident at an art exhibition downtown. She was standing by a painting, the light catching the familiar strands of her hair. Her eyes met his for the briefest second, enough to bring everything back, but not enough to hurt. They smiled, not out of nostalgia, but peace. No words, no tension, just understanding. In that glance, they both knew, some stories aren't meant to last forever. Some are meant to teach you what love feels like, before life gives you the one that stays. The pain of almost loving you taught me something, that sometimes, almost, is the closest we ever get to forever. And maybe, that's enough. It's been a year since that chapter closed. And if you ask Ethan what he remembers most, it's not the pain or the distance, but the quiet moments in between. The way she laughed mid-sentence. The way time felt slower when she was near. The way her presence made ordinary days feel cinematic. He doesn't hate her. He doesn't wish things were different. Because sometimes, life gives you people not to keep, but to wake something inside you, a reminder of what it means to feel deeply again. We spend so much time trying to define love, to label it, claim it, make it make sense. But maybe the truth is simpler. Love doesn't always need to be forever to be real. Sometimes the love that never became anything still shapes you more than the one that did. She taught me that endings aren't always failures, Ethan says quietly. Some endings are just gentle goodbyes, a way for two souls to say, thank you for showing me what I was missing. Maybe you've had your own almost love, the one that kept you awake at 2 a.m., where you told yourself you were just friends, but your heart knew better. Maybe you saw them move on. Maybe you never got closure. And maybe, just maybe, that's why this story feels familiar. If you've ever loved someone who wasn't ready to love you back, this story was for you. Because we all have that one person, the one who didn't stay, but changed us all the same. The pain of almost loving you, Ethan concludes, wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of understanding myself. If the story touched something in you, if it reminded you of your own, almost, drop a broken heart in the comments below. And if you believe love stories, even the unfinished ones, deserve to be told, subscribe to Tales of Us. Because every story, even the ones that never became love, still matter.